Welcome to the Omnibus Show, a program for people who are interested in everything, with deep conversations on a wide variety of subjects. And now your host, Dave Gibbs.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Omnibus Show, the program for people who are interested in everything, with deep conversations on a wide variety of subjects. This week's guest is Henry Mestetsky. He is the Director of Redevelopment for the City of Carmel, Indiana. He's won many awards as the Under 40 from the Indianapolis Business Journal, the Super Lawyer Rising Star, the Best and Brightest from the Junior Achievement, and from the Jewish Federation of Greater Indianapolis, 36 Under 36. So you have a lot of awards, and you've done an incredible job with the City of Carmel. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's great to have you, Henry. Welcome. And, we'll go right into Chapter 1. And it's great to hear your story, as we've talked about before the show. Could you please tell us about your upbringing and how that influenced your vision as head of redevelopment?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. Well, I immigrated, my family immigrated to America in 1994 when I was 9 years old. So I grew up in Kiev, Ukraine. We lived on a 6th floor of a Soviet block housing kind of building, which they all were. I remember I had a subway station, a trolley station, a bus station all in front of my house. So I grew up with that kind of European walkability, that kind of, everyone lives over some stores kind of vibrancy. And at a certain point, we moved to America, and I, ended up going to school here, Pike High School, IUPUI for undergrad. I did accounting and finance there. I went on to law school, and then I went on to focus on real estate and economic development issues. And now my job is to build downtown Carmel, essentially. I was hired about 7 years ago by Mayor Brainerd. Mayor Finkham has kept me on, and she's continuing to allow me to build the kind of 5-6 story walkable downtown that Carmel is famous for, and that so many people that live here love.
Well, it's fabulous. I mean, you've done a great job. Your team's done a great job. There are. It's a unique place. It truly is unique. I don't know an area, because it does embody that walkability, that European walkability that you mentioned, and at the same time, it's a suburb, yet it's a destination city now. It's become its own place.
That's
as
right.
Opposed to just an extension of Indianapolis. And that's a rare thing for suburbs in this post-war era, since the 60s and 70s. Since then, it's been very difficult for suburbs to identify independently, because people would traditionally, it's the past several decades, you build your house in the suburbs, and then you would, dad or mom would drive into the city to work, and then they'd come home, and then you got to have a car. And this is a very different direction than what we've been through in the suburbs for many decades.
That's right. In American suburbs, once people started moving out of the cities into the suburbs, you needed a car to just participate in daily life. And urban planning decided that the best way to build these suburbs was to separate all the uses, so that you had to live in one place, you had to work in a different place, and you had to shop in a third place, and you needed a car for all three of that, and that the law forced that on your built environment. And Carmel is trying to go back to some of the things that made living places special. You and I talked about how your kind of traditional courthouse squares really had those mix of uses where people worked there and they hung out there after work and they maybe lived there. And so Carmel, under former mayors, Mayor Brainerd being chief amongst that, started building out a walkable space in the core. Carmel was, I sometimes think about it as a gift and a curse at the same time. We had no downtown. We had a tiny main street, and then we had a bunch of farmland, and then we had kind of traditional one-story strip centers.
Yes.
So there was no mass to start with, as compared to like Noblesville, that has that traditional courthouse square.
Yes.
And that traditional street grid for the last 150 years.
Yeah.
But at the
Very
same,
different.
Very different. But at the same time, Carmel didn't have, it almost had a blank canvas to allow redevelopment to happen.
Yes.
Which is why we were, Mayor Brainerd, Mayor Finkham have been so successful in building City Center, Main Street, Midtown, all these brand-new walkable redevelopment areas in almost a blank canvas, because there was nothing here before. And what I think is really important, because people have a lot of choices in America, especially now with remote work. You could live anywhere, and cities really have to differentiate themselves. They have to build their own culture. They have to build their own identity. Oftentimes, especially smaller towns, and we see this all over Indiana, your city is your high school, and the culture and identity of your city of your town is your high school. And people graduate, and they never come back because they don't want to repeat that. But our children growing up in Carmel, they remember ice skating with the Palladium behind them, with a light projection on the Palladium. Or they remember going to the farmer's market. They remember, hanging out on Saturday nights in Midtown Plaza, which is this free public space that's akin to the best places in Europe. And our citizens get to grow up with those experiences. These people are more likely to stay here, and when their kids graduate and go and hang out in San Diego for a few years, and it's time for them to start a family, they'll come back here because they'll remember those experiences. And that's a significant cultural win for the city.
I agree. What's happened in America is, like, when my father was growing up, he was one of the few people from Southwest Missouri. He grew up in a town called Ozark. And
I've seen that show.
Yeah, there you go. My family immigrated from England. My great-great-grandparents came over, and they settled in Southwest Missouri. And my dad grew up there, but he went out to California. My family were very poor. My grandfather died at a young age, and so my gram she had 8, but she lost 2. She had 6 children, and during that period, it was very, very difficult. So he went out to sort of make money for himself and for the family out in California. And but I went back to one of the family class reunions, and it's just like most of the folks stayed there. It's the old, America, where people didn't move. But also the thing about that I saw growing up when I would visit is that you had all kinds of people like you used to have. You'd have teachers, you'd have the more scientific people, you would have, because they worked locally, you'd have education people, you had all the different varieties. In the post-war era, and I'm getting to this about architecture and the way we live, is that what happened is the separation. A lot of it happened whereas people who were rural stayed rural, and a lot of the kids, because the yearning from the culture, it's really entertainment culture.
Totally.
I call it the Stork Club culture, because that's where all this started from, in New York. And then it went Hollywood. All of that is to yearn for going to the big city. So that's when after that all these kids I live in the Nowhereville, so I'm leaving. And then you had the split of population where instead of having all kinds of people in your town, you'd have a certain kind of people stay, and then you'd have people who were more urban moving off to the big cities. And a lot of people would move to Indianapolis, they moved to Chicago or New York or beyond. We also have these other cities around us, Louisville and Cincinnati and St. Louis, which have their own draws to certain people. So it's really interesting how that causes that kind of expansiveness, but the kind of design that you've been involved in implementing changes that. It kind of brings it back to the old town. What he was talking about earlier, we talked about in the 1940s, Life magazine did an article on Indiana in which they went to either several, or it's been a while since I've read it, but all of the county seats, and they're all in a square, or I think a circle or a square, usually a square. And that is where people used to socialize, adults as well as kids, on Saturday nights, on a weekend when they had time off. And very similar to what we have, but in a much smaller scale. But because you've got more and more people, this went from, 20,000 people maybe 30 years ago to now we're about 100,000?
Yeah, we about 105,000. You know, as you're talking, it's like the specific reasons that people went to their downtown square have changed.
Yes.
Like 40 years ago, if you needed some clothes, you would go to your courthouse square because there would be a store selling clothes and you would buy it there. Mm-hmm. Today, everyone just gets that from Amazon.
Amazon.
But the need for people to be around other people is a psychological, physiological need. That hasn't changed. And so people still want that same experience. So they're maybe not buying their basic clothes that they need, but in Midtown, there's a candle making shop. Mm-hmm. You could buy your candles on Amazon, but that's not the point. The point is the experience. So that shop does really well. And you make your candles and you're people watching and there's activity. And that need to be in a space like that never goes away. It's just that most smaller towns, it's tough for them to continue providing that kind of experience. That's where Carmel just completely shines. Because not only have city leadership enabled us to build out a walkable environment that's conducive to that kind of experience, the city also programs like 120 events a year. So there's always something going on, whether it's organic from some group in the city or done by the city itself. Those events exist, and that desire to experience something and be around other people can be filled in the city of Carmel.
Yeah, and I think you're succeeding at that, just living here, being in the city and being a part of it. Now I'm beginning to sound like the Chamber of Commerce. But one thing I love doing, one of my little traditions, is Saturday morning going to the markets.
Same.
People I know, you go around, it's just, I'm a guy, so I go in. I'm a hunter, so boom, boom, boom. See ya, take care. But it's always a pleasurable, it is very much, there's the civics of that, of being a part of the town and being there with the people from our city. And well, you would know the theory of language better than I do, but it's that sensibility of space. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the insights on city planning?
Sure.
That helps that sort of mindset.
Yeah.
Like roads and the way you use space.
There's a number of things, and I do want to say my background is not urban planning. Although I grew up in a very urban environment, and my choice trip is a city where I am sitting in a public plaza and experiencing the urbanism and the vibrancy of it all. That's my happy place.
That makes you perfect for the job. You're hired.
Thank you. There's a number of these things that I've picked up over the years. One being, the sense of place. One of the reasons I think our farmers market and the Christkindl market work so well, not just because they're fantastically run by people that put their blood, sweat, and tears into it, but it's the setting. It's the theater on one side and the Palladium on the other side, serving as a backdrop for these experiences. Because there's all sorts of people walk around these spaces.
Yeah.
And for some of them, they're there to get that mango, because that is what my kid is there for on Saturday mornings.
Sure.
The other people are looking at the Palladium and they're just admiring the architecture. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we would have the same success if it was just in a giant Walmart parking lot where many other markets are. I think it's the way that the buildings, the beautiful buildings around that place, frame that public space that really make it work.
Yeah, it has almost, I think the people who've really, really influenced architecture in the West has been the Italians.
That's right.
And their sense of piazza and the whole, the sense of space, the buildings, all that, those classical sensibilities that has influenced so many different countries.
Mayor Brainerd used to do this thing where most people that came to his office talk about building something new. He would hand this book to, and the book was called The Genius of the European Square, written by people that, to write this book, they sat around a bunch of European squares for years and just sipped coffee and tea and then wrote about it, which is that's a good gig if you can get it. And we follow those principles today. It's how to make these public spaces safe and inviting. We talked earlier, there's this concept that a urban planner named Jeff Speck coined. He called it the theory of walkability. He said that all else being equal, somebody will walk instead of drive a car if the walk is safe, comfortable, convenient, and interesting. If you hit all those 4 points.
Yeah.
And I think about, we talked about earlier, you could walk around in Europe for an entire day, for 10 hours, and you probably walk 10 miles, and you don't realize it until you get back to your hotel room at night. But in America, if you're going to go to Walmart and you want to go to another store in that same strip center, you're going to walk to your car and you're going to drive to the other side of that strip center. That's probably a 3-minute walk, and you're not going to make it because that walk is not safe, comfortable, convenient, and interesting. So that European walkability, someone staying at the Hotel Carmichael, where we are right now,
Yes.
could walk south on the Monon or north on the Monon to Main Street, and they would be experiencing that same safe, comfortable, convenient, and interesting walk, filled with art, built in a way where the cars around you, especially on the boulevard or along the Monon, there's a speed limit sign there, but the cars go slower than the speed limit sign because of how the boulevard is built. So the built environment is there to make it safe and comfortable, and interesting and convenient. There's another concept about the height of buildings that comes from behavioral theory and health theory, and it's if you can connect to your neighbors, you will feel more self-actualized. And so if you're walking around and the top floor of the building around you is the 6th floor, you can make eye contact with that person.
Yes.
And you're connected to that person in a way you're not if you're walking by a 40-story skyscraper.
Right.
The same way you're not when you're in a single-family neighborhood and you only see one of your neighbors and you don't see everyone else.
Right.
But that feeling, which happens in Paris a lot, you can see the people, you can make eye contact with the people that are all around you, and you feel healthier and you feel more connected to your neighborhood. And that's what Carmel is.
That's a great observation. Talking about Paris. Paris is one of my favorite walking cities. There's a couple cities that you just get out, you go downtown, and you could go, well, we talked about that, 10, 12 miles without thinking about it. And you just keep going because you want to keep going. And it's like, you see that place over there that you want to go to, and it's about almost a mile, but you see it, and it's like, you're going to walk over there.
That's right.
And because it's within fairly reasonable distance, and I'm the same way with London. A thing that I do is when I go to a city, the first thing I'd like to do is go to the park and walk around the park, Hyde Park or Central Park in New York, and Hyde Park in London, and those are the two biggies. And then we'd also talked about Vancouver. Vancouver is, in my humble estimation, the prettiest city in North America.
Me too.
And I used to go up to Stanley Park, either by myself, it's like one of those things you do, on the way back to Seattle, I would go up and I'd do the rim around, and you'd go up to Ferguson Point.
You rent a bike and you
I
go
would
around the
just
park.
hang out for a while, and then I'd get back in and I'd drive back to.
I've done that. I've done that ride.
To Seattle. But yeah, beautiful, beautiful city. And it's just like, it's really part of being out in that space. And you can just walk and walk and walk. But there are people around. And I think that's very healthy. I think that's very healthy, particularly in these times, is having some connection with people.
Yes.
And that is, that when your connection with people it actually has a pacific outcome in general, unless you have a bayonet or something with you. But I mean, in general, that encountering with people is very positive, and being part of the space.
Totally.
There are people around. If it was empty, it would just be empty. It would be like one of those '70s apocalyptic pictures. But that is that's so fascinating, and I think it's so healthy.
One of my favorite things about European piazzas is it's filled with people, and there'll be a bunch of teenagers, there'll be a bunch of elderly people, there'll be a bunch of, everyone else. Everyone is equally enjoying the space.
Yeah.
And in America, there are not a lot of places like this. Most people, if I ask them to think of a place where people of different ages can all enjoy themselves, they'll say the mall. But that's not a public place. That's a place someone can close. If you think about Christkindl Market, if you think about Midtown Plaza, these are public spaces where every age group, every demographic can be found all spending time together. That's what makes it European and unique.
Yeah. Well, as I've said, that we were like that once upon a time, and I think our success, that was one of the costs, and it separated people. And then you had all the age groups getting separated, and then you had the creation of teenage, and then et cetera, that followed with that, and people got separated from one another. It's healthy to have everybody in all ages together. Question, I always like asking best and favorite questions.
Sure.
What's your favorite, aside from Carmel? I won't put you on the grill with the mayor, but in terms of outside of Carmel, where's your favorite city for outside spaces? If you could go on a vacation for a month and just hang out.
Europe is the best for this.
Okay.
Paris, London, Las Ramblas in Barcelona is, of course, world renowned for this amazing public space. America does this really well too. There's, more, let's call it a little newer cities like San Diego that has incredible public spaces. But honestly, when I talk to people, you don't need Europe as a guide for how to build something right. Cities like Charleston, cities like Savannah.
Charleston's wonderful.
You walk around Charleston and there's a little public space every half a mile that is hidden somewhere until you find it. We can build like that. Again, that's that kind of experience, beautiful, beautiful city experience that we can recreate here in Carmel as we build it out.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Now, Charleston has that older English sensibility.
It does.
Where you have that seaside town.
Yes.
And all that goes with that. If you go to now they're going through tough times now, but in a lot of the old places, particularly in the Southwest, you have a lot of, I'm talking about England, in the Southwest along the channel.
Yep.
There are a lot of those seaside towns that have that similar sensibility where there's
I know exactly
Esplanades and Exmouth and
Bournemouth, Weymouth.
Yeah.
I know. I've been to all those places.
Yeah, and so those have wonderful public spaces
They
like
do.
that. In Boston, I think Boston is kind of become like the big city, but in its earlier times, it was very much, the Common was a place, you took
That's
your
right.
sheep to chew on the grass for a bit, and then you moved them on home. But, and of course, that was a total public space, and that's a very much a very important part of the old.
That's the benefit of, my job in the city of Carmel is to put together public-private partnerships with developers that enable something to get built that otherwise would never be accomplished in the suburbs otherwise. So development in the suburbs is single-family housing, and if it's commercial, it's usually strip centers. Or it's an office building in a gigantic parking lot that is not, you're not going to hang out there after work. It's not inviting. And so the city of Carmel has been, a bit of a pioneer, especially in the state of Indiana, of using public-private partnerships, using tax increment finance, not to bore your listeners, but using tax increment finance, which is where you take 25 years of future taxes from a project to help make the project happen today. usually by covering the cost of the garage, for example. And so that's how you build out really walkability. You hide the cars, you put them underground, you put them behind a beautiful facade. But what you don't have is giant acres of parking. So you make it walkable. And because these are public-private partnerships, you can work with the developers to focus on micro parks, plazas, parking that's also available to our residents for free, which is how Carmel garages are. And these, we just had a ceremony of a grand opening of a courtyard called Mayor Jane's Courtyard.
Oh, yes.
It's a condo and townhome project, all for sale, just north of City Hall. That used to be former parking lots used by the police department, so city-owned, they don't pay taxes. So the city built a garage for those cars, and they took those former unproductive lots, and they built a brand-new neighborhood in them. And the neighborhood surrounds a courtyard that is named Mayor Jane's Courtyard after Mayor Jane Reinman. Mayor Finkham and Mayor Brainerd were there with Mayor Jane Reinman at the ceremony. And it's not a large space. It's not like it's Carter Green. It's a very intimate little courtyard with public seating, and it's a public space. And when you're walking on the Monon, you can see through a paseo, you can see that the courtyard's there and you see a fountain. And it's these kind of magical moments that you walk in, you're like, what's that? And you see a vista that's inviting to you. And you're like, let's go check out this little public space. That's to walk around Paris. That's to walk around Charleston. It's that same vibe. And so
There are a lot of little spaces like that still in New York City.
there are.
Though some of them have been removed, but that was a lot of the old charm to the old city.
That is right.
And, keep it going. That's a wonderful thing. To conclude, could you tell us about, this has been a great success, Hotel Carmichael, and
Yes.
and your involvement with that.
Sure. So former Mayor Brainerd presented the concept of city center, let me step back. City Center has been a project that's been 20 years in the making. It used to be an old farm. The city bought the old farm, put a City Center drive-through, created a brand-new road, and then has been doing public-private partnerships all throughout City Center to essentially grow what it is today. And the city always meant for a marquee, like downtown landmark hotel to anchor City Center. But for the last 20 years, before anything else was built, you couldn't start with the marquee hotel. It almost had to be the last piece of the puzzle. Well, in 2017, Mayor Brainerd and the city council approved that marquee hotel, which became where we're sitting today, the Hotel Carmichael, which is 122 rooms, about 5,000 square feet of meeting space. Has this amazing lounge on the second floor, has a restaurant on the first floor, and has this Feinstein's, which is a cabaret club where we're sitting now that hosts, national, international performers. Really complementary to what is happening at the Palladium and the Center for the Performing Arts. And so I got hired. We took the hotel through design and ultimately construction and COVID and then grand opening. And there's so many things that make this hotel so special. It's Autograph is the Marriott's highest luxury brand. So this was the state's first Autograph. The state's first Autograph wasn't in Indianapolis; it was in Carmel. The architecture here is absolutely beautiful. What I love about this hotel, it essentially has two front doors. It has the front door to the north in front of the front desk, but it has an equal front door to the Monon, because the Monon is equally important here. My favorite part is when they're doing NCAA Selection Sunday from a secret location, and when they televise it, it says that the secret location is somewhere in Carmel, Indiana, and the whole nation gets to see that. Well, we know what that secret location is. It's this hotel. So I think it's brought a number of people to Carmel that otherwise wouldn't come here, and they get to learn the secret, which is how incredibly walkable, vibrant the downtown of the city is.
Yeah. Well, that's a wonderful place to conclude, and thank you. We've really enjoyed it in our time here. And I've known people I know people who have come and have really enjoyed their time here. It's like, it's like a beautiful, I don't want to say boutique, because boutiques are usually the smaller type.
Boutique-y.
But it's like more the traditional 5-star. It has that
Yep.
feel of any big city. Pick whatever big name Toronto, New York, London, Paris, etc. It's quite a place.
It is.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's I have one thing to say for you. It's very chill to be in the library, which is behind the fireplace on the first level in the lobby. And it's very close to, in terms of European hotels, there's a place, it's all red velvet. And it's in the Hotel Raphael in Paris, where Eisenhower and co. during World War II, they set up their, but it's an old hotel that has been around, but it's this beautiful place called the English Bar. And it's the chillest place in a big city I've ever been. And in terms of the library, it has a similar, that heavy, quiet, good feel
does.
type of thing, so.
I'll tell you that the books in the background, on the bookshelves in the library upstairs, we needed some books, and we asked our Carmel Library if they were throwing away any books, and they said we were going to recycle these. So a lot of the books you see on the shelves were going to be recycled by the Carmel Library, and we got them, we took the stickers off, and now they have formed the backdrop for the space you were just describing.
That's great. Well, that's fabulous, and that's good civics, right?
That's right.
Yes. Well, Henry, thank you for
Thank
being
you.
on our show. It's great to have you, and it's also great to learn more about cities and how one can grow a city in a real livable way. And this is really, really healthy for, I think, where we're at everywhere. And if more cities can develop like this, obviously uniquely in their own way, but this is just, it's been a great project. And thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you, Henry. Well, that's it for this episode of the Omnibus Show. This week's guest has been Henry Mestetsky. He is the Director of Redevelopment for here in Carmel, Indiana. We'd like to thank Hotel Carmichael for sponsoring us, and we are recording today from Feinstein's. We look forward to being with you on our next episode of the Omnibus Show.
If you enjoyed this program, please like, share, and subscribe to continue the conversation. For the Omnibus Show newsletter, please sign up at theomnibusshow.com.